Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Jeff and Nick Show. Today is November 3rd, but really, we're doing a Back to the Future episode because Sunday is November 5th.
That's right.
And what that means to us is it is Back to the Future Day.
Woohoo!
Jeff, these movies were released in 1985. Do you remember seeing them in any of them in the theaters?
I don't think I saw one in the theaters. I think I saw it in the drive-in theaters. I think I saw two. I know I saw 2 and 3 in the movie theaters. What about you? Did you see them? Let's start with you. I feel like I always go first. What about you, Nick? Did you see these movies? Where did you first see these movies, and what did you think about them?
I'm pretty sure when I was a kid, USA was a big network, and we were always watching. I can't remember when I saw them, but I remember seeing them on that station or TBS or TNT, one of those movie stations, and understanding that I never saw them in the theaters. The first one was released in 85. The second two were filmed simultaneously. So you went from 2 to 3, and they filmed them over a 9-month period?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
they filmed them back to back. I remember that even back then because I remember seeing the second one in the theaters, and then you get the immediate, like trailer for the third one, like right after it.
Yeah,
I distinctly remember that.
You're ready for the third one right away, and it's like, oh my gosh, let's go see it.
Would they release them a year apart? Because I know it was 89 for number 2 and 90 for number 3. I didn't check to see like when the actual release dates were, but they were probably about a year apart just to give a little space. But yeah, man, I remember seeing the first one in the drive-in. I don't know, you've been to the drive-in? I know they have a drive-in in Torrance. We've actually been there once.
I did. We would go to the drive-in. My parents would watch one movie, and then my brother and I would sit in the back and we'd watch Mickey and the Prince and the Pauper, or something else that was of more interest to us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember ever what movies I actually sat through in the drive-in, but I do remember going to the drive-in.
I remember going, and it was like, the drive-in back in the 80s where it was like, you get the speaker box and you put it inside in your window. You don't just tune into a station like you do now. Like you actually got the little speaker box with the cord, and you got to put it in and roll down your window, and hopefully it's not cold out. Let the cold air in. But
yeah,
like I distinctly remember watching this. And I think the drive-in got things afterwards. So it was probably after it came out. I mean, it was 85, so I was 6. I was pretty young when I saw it, so I probably saw it either at the end of that year or maybe early next year when I was, like 6 or 7. But yeah,
slightly older.
It's so good. I love these movies. These movies are great. They're timeless. They're classics. They hold up. They're pretty funny still. There's nothing. They're not. A lot of those 80s movies. You watch those 80 movies back, and you're just like, dang, man, people are like super sexist, super racist. This one doesn't. I think these movies they hold up pretty well. Like they don't really run those lines of being super racist and making bad jokes about women. I think there's a couple maybe in there, with Biff obviously in the first one trying to take advantage of Lorraine and stuff, that type of stuff. But a lot of those movies in the 80s really fell into that, those easy tropes of making fun of stereotypes and things like that. And I think it was refreshing to see a couple 80s movies that didn't really lean into that and just use the actual story to push the narrative along and get jokes out of your main characters making jokes or doing funny things instead of hitting that I got to make fun of an Asian person to make some bad joke. You know what I mean? I think number 2 kind of had it a little bit, but for the most part, it did pretty well to stay away from that, which I really appreciate.
So, how did you watch these movies? Did you watch them? They're available on Peacock, but do you have them on DVD?
Yeah, I went the good old Torrance Library, baby. They got the 3-pack DVD, so I watched them on Blu-ray. Just popped them in, and just watched them on DVD. I thought they were for some reason I thought they were on HBO, so I was like, I turned on HBO one night and I was like going to watch it, and they're like, oh, it's not here, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so I had to go to the library. Yeah. I almost hit you up for that Peacock login, but no, I found them there.
Yeah, I have them as well. I have the special edition. My brother and I are very big Back to the Future fans, and I will, on our Spotify and on our YouTube channel, I will post a video about a little bit of a, I don't necessarily want to call it a conspiracy theory, but a little extraterrestrial involvement in Back to the Future with Marty and the Greys, and a lot of different things surrounding number two. But one thing I did see in number two that I didn't remember was, and this may have remained the same in yours because with Universal they own the rights to Paramount. Excuse me, Peacock.
Mm-hmm.
When Marty goes back in time, back to 1955, he's inside of whatever Biff's car, and
Right.
Biff goes over to see Lorraine, and Lorraine's talking about her dress, and he's got his hands on her. He's like, "One day you're going to be my wife," and she says, in my head, I can already picture it. It says, "Get your meat hooks off of me."
Yeah.
Yeah. In the Peacock version, it's "Get your cooties off of me."
You know what? I feel like it said that in the DVD now that I'm thinking about it because I remember hearing cooties. Get your cooties off me. That sounds. And now when you said meat hooks, I'm like, wait, that's the line. Get your meat hooks off me.
That's the original
Is
line.
Is that racist or is that inappropriate now?
I don't know. I mean, these look like meat hooks to me. I don't really know. I don't understand.
Whoa! Hey, pump the brakes, Nick. Hey, this is a family show here.
Time out. Cancel culture. So
no, but that's so true, man. Now that I think about it, like now I'm gonna go back and watch, but I'm almost positive now that I think about it because I literally just watched it yesterday, and yeah, she said, "Get your cooties off me," and I remember. And I didn't think anything of it, like, oh, that's not the line. But I remember tracking that and thinking, like, oh, that's funny. I don't remember ever hearing the cooties in any of these movies, but didn't think anything of it. But now that you mentioned that, like, yeah, dude, I'm pretty sure she says, "Get your meat hooks off me."
Yeah. So a couple things I did want to hit on. Originally, you see the young woman. Let me get her name. Claudia Wells is Jennifer.
Yeah, the first Jennifer.
The first Jennifer. In the second one, so you watch these movies 1, 2, 3. It's not one of those where you could go 2, 3, 1.
Yeah, you'd be like, "What's going on here?"
Correct. So in the second movie, after when the Doc's putting all the trash into the DeLorean into Mr. Fusion, it takes a second for Marty and Jennifer to come on screen, as if they're waiting for their cue to come on screen. So Claudia Wells' mother was also her agent. She was diagnosed with and wound up dying of breast cancer, which pulled her out of the movie, replacing her with Elizabeth Shue, who did great things for this movie. The small parts that she's in. Eric Stoltz. I never knew who Eric Stoltz was until I started doing the research, but he was originally cast as Marty McFly.
Like they did a whole thing. Like they did a lot of scenes. They did a diner scene. They did the whole DeLorean, like right before, the Twin Pines Mall scene. Like they filmed all that with him. I think some scenes you can even see him in the car. You can't really notice it because it's real quick, but you can, like, if you pause it, you can tell like, oh, that's not Michael J. Fox. That's Eric Stoltz's big flaming red hair.
Exactly. And so Eric Stoltz here's our cross culture reference. He's the guy in Pulp Fiction where John Travolta pulls up to his house. He's like, "What the hell, man? Prank caller." So that's Eric. I never knew who that was.
Dealer. Yeah, he's a drug dealer in that.
Yeah.
Drug dealer in that movie, and he's been in a bunch of things. I don't know. He was in he was The Mask. I don't remember if you've seen The Mask, where he's got the deformed face. Cher. That's another '80s movie. Very sad movie. Good movie. Very sad.
I think I have. I think I know what movie you're talking about, but I do not know the movie.
Yeah, Cher's in it. He was in 2 Days in the Valley, which is the poor man's version of Pulp Fiction. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like Charlize Theron. It's her first movie. She's naked in it, by the way.
Whoa! This is a family show.
Sorry, family show.
Family show
again. James Spader is in that one. Yeah, that's a really good movie. You should watch that one. 2 Days in the Valley. Everybody go watch that. It's a really good movie.
Johnny Be Good was sung by Mark Campbell, and the guitar was Tim May. And Michael J. Fox can play the guitar, but he chose for somebody else to do it. So
Play
I
smart.
was a little bit of a backstory to this whole thing and what kind of sprung my interest even more. So my aunt was a very big Back to the Future fan, um, but back when he was doing a TV show, I forget what the TV show was, but they were in some senator's office or some political office.
Mm-hmm.
They were coming around and they were looking for the pristine, model American neighborhood.
Okay.
And the producers, they were coming around and they were in our neighborhood, like, hey, what's going on? We're playing football outside. It was four of us. It was myself, my brother, and two of my friends. Like, oh, this looks, cookie cutter neighborhood. No picket white fences. Kids are outside playing. And so they used three or four of the houses in our neighborhood, and Michael J. Fox was in it. Well, the night before, my brother and I decided to sneak out and go hang out with our friends. We got caught, and we weren't allowed outside. So Michael J. Fox is in our neighborhood, and we're not allowed outside.
Actions have consequences, Nick.
Yeah, I am learning those, and my kids are learning those too. Crispin Glover is only in the first episode, then the first movie.
First movie, yeah, he was replaced, and you don't really see him. He's obviously in prosthetics in the second one, and then the only time he's in the third one is at the very end when Michael J. Fox comes back and he's still in his Western gear. But if you notice, like, what's her name? Leah Thompson comes out, and her character, I don't know who played him, the new actor who played George McFly, he stayed all the way on the porch, sunglasses on, kind of in the distance where he didn't get close. You couldn't really tell that it wasn't Crispin Glover. But Crispin Glover's weird. I don't know if you ever see anything else that dude has been in. That's a weird dude. Have you ever seen any things he's been in or interviews he's given? That is a weird dude, man. He's a weird guy. I mean,
come on, Pop. How about a little bit of oil for the car? Yeah, time to change your oil. The laugh is hilarious. Did you?
I'm gonna run it on down there. He's so good. I love George McFly.
He's
feel
great.
like I'd be friends with him. I'd want to hang out with him and to see the funny things he would do. And you all had those awkward friends. It's like he's that one awkward friend. It just do funny things. It's funny. I love it.
Apparently, he hands out cue cards or note cards to people when they ask him if he knows Michael J. Fox.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah. Do you know who else auditioned for the role of Marty McFly?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Probably let's see. Well, in the '80s, Kirk Cameron, Emilio Estevez, those. I think I'm going that way. I'm trying to think of young kids and Anthony Michael Hall. I could see that.
You're close. You're kind of close.
I'm on the path there.
Here's three that had one aspect or another, but didn't have both that Michael J. Fox had. John Cryer, can't see it. Cannot see it.
No.
Especially with Walleye. His character as Walleye in Hot Shots was not, I could not see him as Marty McFly. Thomas Howell.
I don't know if Thomas Howell's funny enough.
I think he's got the look, but he doesn't have the humor.
He'd be more like the Eric Stoltz. I think he'd fall in like the Eric Stoltz. A little too serious, not wholesome looking enough as Michael J. Fox. He's so wholesome looking. Who's the third one?
Ben Stiller.
Oh, no, that wouldn't work. I don't think that would have been a whole different. That, you know what? Honestly, though, I'll bet of those three, I think Ben Stiller. He's kind of small like Michael J. Fox, which I think lent itself to the the opposite of him and Biff being this huge dude, and then Michael J. Fox always been called chicken, and he's this little guy, and always he's got that Napoleon syndrome going the whole for these three movies. But I feel like Ben Stiller, he I don't know, that'd be interesting. Ben Stiller, I think might be able to make it work.
And then Thomas Wilson is Biff, who does an amazing job in all three movies. He's one of the most well-known polarizing characters in this movie, based on his attitude, based on
he's the worst. He's so mean.
Exactly. He's such a jerk, and it's funny because anytime somebody hits me with one of those, it's like a screen door on a battleship, I can't help but laugh. I can't help but
make a tree and get out of here.
Right.
So bad.
Why don't you make like a
He's
banana
he's
and leave?
he's so good in this. Like you really get. I mean, the first one obviously he's pretty messed up, but man, as these movies go on, he just is just the villain in the truest sense. And he's got obviously got some comedic things to him and all, but I mean, he really is a true villain. Like just think like when you first see him in the second one, he like grabs a little kid's ball and like chucks it up on the roof. Like,
Go get
dang
it!
man, like dang, like
Yeah.
dude. That's so
Yep.
mean. These little kids are just asking for their ball back. Like, dang, so mean.
Yep.
And
I got the right house. I got
yeah,
the right house.
right. He's just so, the more he goes, it just gets, he's just the clear villain. And it's funny, like you don't ever really, you hear lists of the greatest villains of all time, so, Darth Vader and Kaiser Sose, these types of things, and all these types of villains. But you never really hear about Biff Tannen, because he was a really good villain, and he played like three different villains. You know what I mean? Himself, basically, he played two of them himself. Obviously the young version and the older version in number two, and then obviously what's called Mad Dog Tannen.
That would
in
have to
number
be like
three.
his grandfather.
Great grandfather, or great.
Yeah.
I think it was great grandfather. I'm not sure how that worked, because what's it called William McFly was the baby in number three, and that was Marty's grandpa, right?
Yeah.
So then meaning Seamus was his great grandpa. So if we go by that, I'm going to go by that and be like, so that was probably Mad Dog was probably his great grandpa.
Well, because Biff is as old as the parents, so Mad Dog's his grandfather.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Is that how you think it worked? Yeah. I don't know. Great grandpa or grandpa? What? Either one.
Really quick on Kaiser Soze, because it's in my head. So all of the cast members thought that they were Kaiser Soze. The only person that knew that they were was Kevin Spacey.
Oh wow, that's cool.
He was the only one in that movie, set in San Pedro. Amazing. I love that movie. I laugh every time that lineup scene happens.
Oh, that was all like improv too. That lineup scene.
I love it.
This is great.
How fast can a DeLorean go?
That's a good question. I don't know.
85.
Oh, really? Is that
is
right?
the top speed
for
for DeLorean. Yeah.
They were made out of what? Aluminum? Is that what they were? There was a special thing. I forget what they were made out of. I'd have to look that up. I should have looked that up more. But I know DeLorean's was a huge fail. It was like supposed to be this car of the future with the gull wing, doors. And I think from what I understand, it was a huge failure and almost put like Chrysler out of business, right? I think it was a Chrysler product. I think the guy, John DeLorean, was like the VP at Chrysler, and they wouldn't let him make this car. So he went out and made it on his own, but they ended up still using it under their brand or something like that. I think that's what happened. Or they let him create like his own kind of brand. Yeah.
I've only seen a couple, maybe a handful. And
there's actually there's one in a garage, like literally down the street. When we go walking and walk the dog, we noticed oh crap, there's a freaking DeLorean in there. I've never seen it out the garage, but it's in one of these garages in my neighborhood. It's kind of funny.
We could also go to the Peterson Automobile Museum in Los Angeles and go check that out. So a lot of this was filmed in Los Angeles. Pasadena is where a lot of these houses are. The high school is Whittier High School.
Yeah.
And there was
Puente Hills Mall, I believe, is
there you go. Puente Hills Mall is the mall. The Twin Pines Mall.
For the longest time when I was growing up, I don't know why, but I was under the impression that mall, and probably just because I was a kid, I didn't know any better. I probably just saw JCPenney and just assumed it was the mall where I'm from in Fremont, California. And like literally until I was an adult, I thought like, oh no, that's the one in Fremont. That's where I grew up. That's my mall. Even though it looks nothing like it. Like looking back, I'm like, doesn't look anything like our mall. But for some reason, I had that in my head until I was like an adult. Like, oh no, that's the mall from our hometown, my hometown. I don't know why. We always thought that, and it was clearly wasn't.
I like how in the second and third movies they kind of cross-reference things that happened in the first movie.
Yeah,
and
there's so much foreshadowing.
There's so much foreshadowing and so much, so much looking back, and the amount of stuff. I've got the first movie on right now, and seeing it, it's so like, I remember hearing a story from a guy that I used to hang out with a long time ago. And we keep in touch, but he would hang out with Christopher Lloyd, and the amount of cocaine that this man did for these movies was insane. I mean,
what was the 80s?
We're talking, yeah, right. We are talking about the 80s here. It is the decade of cocaine. but how he, the kind of research that I did for this, just because I love these movies so much and I wanted to get back into seeing what they were about, how much in character he was for this part. I mean, look at him as Uncle Fester.
Yeah.
He was so good. I think he's one of the best actors just based on the fact that he got so into character. You know, you're looking at a guy who he's done a lot of interesting stuff over his career. And anytime I see him, I'm like, wait a second, is that Christopher Lloyd?
Yeah.
But him as Uncle Fester, and then
So
him
good.
as Dr. Brown. He's amazing.
Is he still alive? Is he alive or is he dead?
He's still alive.
He is, okay. Well, I wonder what the last thing he was in. I can't even think of.
I can't either, but he still makes appearances. There's a Broadway show for this movie. I would love to see it in
That'd be cool.
California at the Pantages Theater if it ever comes out here way.
That'd be cool.
No McFly has ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley. Strickland it's all about discipline and respect, and how he works his way in is great.
Didn't that guy ever have hair?
Yeah, right.
I don't know if you noticed a few of the first time roles in this. I don't know if you noticed. I looked at Billy Zane was in the first one. I didn't even know that literally until yesterday. He was the guy in Biff's gang. You know, in the first one, he had the toothpick. He was the guy with the toothpick. He wasn't in 2 or 3, and he wasn't even in 2 where they went and showed, you know, went back, you know, number 2. He was only in the first one. That was his very first film role. And
you know what he was great in?
Which
Billy Zane,
Zoolander,
The Phantom.
The Phantom. I never saw The Phantom.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I forget who else is in it, but he's Christy Swanson's in it.
Oh, how funny!
Yeah, Christy Swanson's in it. Yeah,
and Elijah Wood was in number 2 as one of the kids playing the video game. I think he made the comment like, "You have to use your hands."
Yeah. Who was the other? Game. The other kid looks like he's kind of familiar, but Elijah Wood is definitely. Yeah. You definitely noticed that.
Yeah. Now, there's another thing that I noticed. You know, they talked about, you know, in the first one that, you know, was Mayor Goldie Wilson. You know, obviously he was the mayor in the 1985. Then you see him in 1955. You know, and then he said, "Oh, I'm going to run for mayor." You know, and then the owner, like, a colored mayor. That'll be the day. So I had looked that up. Yeah, there was, there's black mayors before that. The first first mayor of a town in the United States was in 1868, Pierre Caliste Landry in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. That was the very first black mayor in the United States. The very first of a large major city was Carl Stokes in 1967 for Cleveland. Oh, well, we've been hearing so much about it in all these movies, but look how progressive Cleveland is. Good for them. Good for Cleveland.
Cleveland was the second city with to integrate baseball.
Oh, look at that! Look at them. See, Cleveland. All these movies started to bash on Cleveland, but good for them. Yeah. So that was of the major city of a large city, what's considered a large city in the United States. It was 1967, which would have been 12 years after this movie. Which I don't think Hill Valley is considered a large city, but
no. And Hill Valley we can see that it's set in California.
Oh, but hold on now, that's not true. Because number 2, they're out in the middle of Monument Valley. So when number 3, he's out in Monument Valley when they go back. I made a note of that. I'm like, oh, that's funny. They're out. Apparently, Hill Valley is 20, 30, maybe 50 miles from Monument Valley. But I thought that was kind of funny. I hate when people do that. Like, we're clearly not near Monument Valley. We're clearly trying to show Southern California, but then we go out there, which I don't like it in the terms of the continuity of the film, but I like it in terms of, I mean, for those guys like the Robert Zemeckis and like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, all those dudes who grew up at this time. And started making films like the 70s and then into the 80s, like they're heavily influenced by, Westerns, John Wayne Westerns, the John Ford, who made, all those Westerns back in the early days with John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart and things like that. They're heavily influenced. And if you watch those John Wayne movies, dude, I mean, they ride around that valley. The Searchers, they ride around that for years, just to see the same Monument Valley, see the same things. So it was nice. It was cool to see a little homage to that location, because it was so frequent. I'm sure it was in all the movies that they watched growing up as kids. That location and that backdrop was in so many of these movies, and because it's beautiful, it's an absolutely gorgeous landscape, and it lends itself to a Western. So I get why it was there. I get why they want to use it, but just in terms of like where the city was located, it didn't really make sense. It made me think of a Transformers movie when they were like in the Smithsonian and they go out a back door and all of a sudden there's this huge open field of like plains and it's a desert. I'm like, I don't think that's behind them in Washington, D.C. It kind of made me think of that.
Yeah. So that's good because, it's kind of the other thing where there's so many references to other things and you're using so much inspiration for these movies, especially all of the Clint Eastwood stuff. It's like, who the hell is Clint Eastwood? And and then he walks, in the third one,
is that?
he's got, in the second one, Biff's in the jacuzzi with the two girls. Yep. And they're watching
Fistful of Dollars, I believe it is.
They're watching that, and he's like, oh, heck of a flick. And then he goes to the Old West. He's like, what's your name? Clint Eastwood.
Clint.
What kind of name is that?
What kind of stupid name is that?
Yeah, and then...
This is on those shoes. Says Nikkei.
Nikkei, is that some Asian...
Is that some Indian word?
And then at the end, it's Eastwood Ravine, not Clayton Ravine. Yeah. So a couple things
he used the bulletproof vest type. They used basically the same thing, which the iron on it, which also refers back to Doc using the bulletproof vest too.
Yeah,
each of them that got shot, they had a form of bulletproof vest. Although I would contend in number 3. When Marty gets shot, you would hear that thing go ding, like bouncing off of him. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, good thing we're using blanks, not actual bullets.
Right.
So Robert Zemeckis found the inspiration for the film from his father's high school yearbook.
Oh, cool.
Steven Spielberg helped get the first movie made.
It feels like a Spielberg movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with like the dad angle, with like the father-son relationship. A lot of Spielberg movies deal with that, the father-son relationship. And this one clearly did, even though we've talked a lot of sports movies talking, going with the father-son relationship. And I think this, even though it's not a sports movie, it definitely leaned into that father-son relationship, especially in the first one, of how, Marty got to see what his dad was like and what shaped him into the person that he became, the man that he became, and why he was like that, because he was basically bullied by Biff and just beaten down, figuratively, and mentally probably by him for all these years. And he got to finally see, and then he was able to give him, that confidence to rise up out of that and to face his bully. So that was kind of a cool thing. That's how he bonded with his dad, because he clearly wasn't bonding with him in the present day, 1985, but he got to do that, to go back and bond with him there. I thought that was really cool.
So part of the things that I read about was George is the only one that's privy to what's going on, because he's open-minded enough to time travel. And then his book is about a guy from space. Yeah. And it's, and everything about it, it's like he doesn't do anything to stop it, because what he knows is going to happen is going to benefit him in the future. Yeah. So he's not about stopping it. He's about helping it once he realizes what's going on.
Yeah.
So for me, that was huge, because you understand that George is going to know what's going on. The film never explained how Marty and Doc met, but Robert Gale, one of the producers for the movie, said that they had met after Marty broke into Doc's lab. And Doc caught him in the act, and after Marty professed his interest, Doc gave him a part-time job helping with experiments.
Huh.
Did you know that the time machine was supposed to be a refrigerator?
That actually does sound. That kind of sounds familiar. Hold on, I want to go back though. What you were talking about how they became friends and everything, because this has always bothered me about this movie though. Like, okay, I have a teenage son. My son just turned 16. I'm assuming Marty McFly is 16. He's obviously can drive, so he's 16, maybe 18. Let's give him 18.
He's 17.
Let's give him 17. All right, we'll call him 17. I mean, dude, if my son is going over to some old 50, 60-year-old dude's house, like after in the morning and going out and hanging out there. And that's your friend. Cause you don't meet any of Marty's other friends. He talks about going camping with the guys, but the only one you really see is Doc.
Or
And
Jennifer.
I'm like, man, if this, I'm like, son, maybe we could try to find hanging out with some dudes your own age instead of hanging around some old guy with some crazy hair. Like, I don't know. It's just it's also what bothered me about Karate Kid. Like, it was at number 3. He's like, oh, he's also my best friend. Like, really, Daniel? I mean, you're like 18 years old. You can't find, like, that's your best friend, bro? Like, an old man? Like, we can't find dudes our own age to hang out with? I always think that's funny. Like, that's his best friend is Doc Brown. And he's like, probably, he's, what, 30, 40 years older than him? I think that's
easily.
It's just weird. And I wouldn't let my son do that.
No. Well, I mean, he's got to be a lot older because in 1955, he's got the gray hair, and then in 1985, he's 30 years older. So there's no way that we know how old Doc Brown is in these movies, just based on everything that's going on. He could just have really bad genes and just look super old.
I want to say, oh no, maybe that was George McFly. He was born in 1938 because I think they showed that. Oh yeah, I think that was on his tombstone in number 2. He was born in 38. So I mean, if you say that I think in number 2, his hair was supposed to be blonde. I think it was supposed to be blonde, but it looked pretty white. So let's see, 30 years old. But dude, he didn't look 25. Let's say he's 55 in 1985.
And then he's 85 in 85?
No, yeah, that can't be. No, so he's got to be, let's say, what would we say? 35 in 55, which would make him 65 and 85?
Yeah.
I could give that. Maybe I could get away with that. 30 and then 60. How about that?
The books confirm that Doc was born in 1920, meaning he was 65 in 1985.
Okay, so yeah, that's
only 35 during the past scenes in 1955.
All right, I can see that. But still, so that means he's 65 in 1985, and Marty's making friends with a 65-year-old man, and that's like his best friend. Hey, Dad, I'm going to meet my friend at the mall at 1:00 in the morning. My 65-year-old buddy. I'm going to sneak out.
Yeah. So Michael J. Fox was still filming Family Ties for the first 3 months, and he was doing back-to-back duty. So it says in this article, he filmed the TV show during the day before rushing to the Back to the Future set until just before dawn. And in a memoir that he released in 2003, at that point, I'd climb into the back of a production van with a pillow and a blanket, yet another driver would take me home again, sometimes literally carrying me into my apartment and dropping me into bed.
Well, dang. Hey,
Crispin Glover, the reason that Crispin Glover didn't appear in any of the other movies was because of a salary dispute.
Yeah, money, right? He wanted more.
Yeah. Insisted on a pay raise.
Yeah. I wonder, it'd be interesting, like, would he have been, if they would have met his demands, would his character have been more in it? Like, because, I mean, he was barely in it in number 2, so why would we pay him more if your scenes are cut? You're not the main focus of the story anymore. You're literally in the second half of the movie, he's not there, he's dead. So, why would you get a pay raise? But I wonder if it was, maybe his role was cut short in the future one because of that, just because they had to kind of cut him out and made him, very in the background.
There's some Easter eggs in this movie that allude to. I'll link this in our YouTube and Spotify page so that you guys can check it out. But did you know that Richard Nixon went to Whittier High School?
I did not.
Yeah. Do you know where the high school scenes were filmed?
Whittier High School?
Whittier High School. Because it had such a great way of a great look to it. And I do have a former coworker. You may have met this guy throughout our time at my old Trader Joe's, but he went to high school there, and they filmed it while he was in high school.
That's cool. Right on. That's cool.
The setting for the third movie was Michael J. Fox's idea.
In the Old West.
Yeah. And there will not be, I would never hope that there's a fourth, but there is not a fourth.
From what I hear, it's Robert Zemeckis, I believe, owns the complete rights to the Back to the Future. Him and the other producer guy,
Robert
And
Gale.
so it's not like, so it's not like, Disney or Universal can be like, oh, we're going to make another movie, because he's like, Robert Zemeckis is like the sole proprietor of it or something like that, or
Yeah.
him and this other dude. So it's like, if anybody's going to sign off, he would have to be the one to sign off to do another one, which I'm glad they're not. There's nothing to do. The story was wrapped up. They finished, unless they would be like, oh, we got to save your kids again, like, you know what I mean, like your grandkids this time. That's what it would be, but it'd be the same thing, and there's no need for it. We don't need to go do that and save somebody else's grandkids. Every other movie's done that, so we don't need to do that.
Did you know that Disney didn't want to pick up this movie because they thought it was incestuous?
Oh, because of the mom and him and the mom.
Yeah.
I could
It
see
feels
that.
like I'm kissing my brother.
Yeah. What do you think when they got to the 80s, they would have known Calvin Klein? They would have been like, oh, hey, I remember that dude. He had those underwear. I said Calvin Klein. Like, it's a pretty big deal. He was in his inner room. And then they didn't, like, when that brand came out, they didn't think of anything of it. I always thought that was kind of funny. I remember, I don't know about you. Okay, so I remember when the number 2 came. Let's talk about hoverboards here for a second, because, I mean, that was the biggest thing. Like, I remember, so I was 10, right, when Back to the Future 2 came out. I remember seeing these hoverboards and been like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my entire life. There's nothing that's ever going to top this. Where can we get one of these? And there was always that rumor of like, oh, these are real, but the mothers, I specifically remember, like the Mothers of America, which is that even a thing? Basically said no, they don't want their kids riding it, and like that was the whole urban legend. And I remember we would every once in a while somebody would be like, oh yeah, a friend of a friend was on it, and da da da, and like it was the pinnacle of like technology for kids at that time to get on a friggin' flying skateboard, and I just remember being a kid and seeing that, and just being in awe and like thinking that was just amazing. And seeing the future stuff, that was the main selling point of that number 2, was like all the hoverboard, the future thing, the flying cars, and it took place in 2015, and obviously we don't have anything like that. So,
yeah, right.
It's like I was robbed of my childhood. I feel like should have been more, but yeah, man, I remember that hype. The hype for it was huge with kids. I mean, it was probably like 4th grade, and like we were all just so excited to see this hoverboard that we saw in the trailer. I remember specifically. Do you remember? Did you have that feeling, or were you too? Was it a little too young?
No, I mean, having watched these movies when I was younger, I was like, oh, cool, hoverboard. And they sold them at Toys R Us, or they sold them online, but they were just so expensive. Astronomically expensive, something that I could never, afford.
Yeah.
I ride a skateboard here and there, but it's never been something where I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
I thought Michael J. Fox was like the greatest skateboarder after number 1. I was like, oh my god, he's like professional. He's so good. He's like the best in the world. I didn't know anything about stuntmen back in the day.
But the one thing about hoverboards is they don't work on water.
Yeah, they do not.
You got to have power. Flea, a couple of cameos from Flea in these movies.
As Needles.
Needles, yeah.
Were we supposed to know who that was? Because the way that scene unfolded, and the way that Jennifer, the what's her name, Elizabeth Shue character, was like, Needles? Like she knew who that was. But there's no reference to that character prior, and none until almost the very last scene of the 3rd movie. So it was very, right? Wasn't he? It was Needles, right? And that with the accident.
Hey, I see Billy Zane. There you go. I do see what you're talking about.
So I wonder if like there was the deleted scene or something where it showed Needles or something like that where it mentioned him, because I remember even seeing that as a kid. I'm like, are we supposed to know who this character is? Like they seem to know. The only reason I say that is because she seemed to know who he was. She was like, as her 1985 self knew in 2015 who that name was. So it made me think of, always made me wonder why she knew that name, or there's a scene missing.
When was the last time you went to Universal Studios?
We went pre-COVID, like right at the end of 2019, actually.
Did you go on the backlot tour?
Yes, and we saw the Hill Valley. Yeah, we saw that. Yeah.
So it's still there. The courthouse is still there, of course. And they use the courthouse for a ton of other stuff.
Oh yeah.
But nothing else. So nothing else is there, and that's one thing that you understand with movies consistently being made. And Back to the Future is very big, and they even showed the DeLorean and other things. but I got a picture from my brother a couple weeks ago, and it was just a house. It was just a house. I said, "Oh, is that Doc Brown's house?"
Oh,
Bingo. So he
oh
must have
yeah,
been in. All this stuff was in Pasadena.
yeah. I
A
can see.
lot
It
of the
looks like a
houses were in
Pasadena house.
Pasadena.
It looks like that. A big ass house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you think he got his money from? Remember, he said he spent his entire fortune. It'd be interesting. I'm surprised we never learned that where his family money came from because he said in the first one he said he spent his entire family fortune on creating it.
Exactly. And then in the first movie at the beginning, it's they sold a bunch of land. He sold like 500 acres of land
Oh,
to an
really?
investor. Yeah, if you go back and you watch the first one,
It was
as
like in
Marty's
the
going through, and
yeah.
then they start talking
Oh,
about
okay.
the case of the missing plutonium.
Right. Oh,
Um,
right. So it's like on a newspaper clipping or something. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because then
That
it
sounds
says
familiar.
Brown family mansion destroyed in fire.
In fire. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So he's probably
So
trying to create something, and then they probably sold off all that land he was on to do it. You know, because then he's
yeah,
living behind a Burger King.
yeah, and
Right.
That Burger King's in North Hollywood somewhere. I feel like.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, a lot
All
of
in
this stuff
balance.
is Pasadena. Jennifer Parker's house is Monrovia. Um, the tunnel is near Griffith Park.
Yep.
Some of this stuff was actually the McFly farm, where Hill Valley back in the day was set, is Oak Park.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was filmed in Northern California.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then it says that Hill Valley is set in the Sierra Nevadas. So that's where initially it was supposed to be set,
Oh,
unless I read
oh,
that wrong.
interesting. Huh. Well, I like how we talk about the foreshadowing and stuff, and like when they went to 25 or no, when came back to the alternate, 1985. It's kind of like the old west. If you look at like the way that things are, I mean, they got outlaws, bikers and outlaws and guns firing off and stuff like that. I like that, how it was, you could clearly see they were going in the old west direction from that. You mentioned he's watching the old west, the Clint Eastwood in the hot tub. And Doc mentioned it. So like I said, a lot of foreshadowing. Did you notice on Doc's shirt, all the trains, he had a train shirt, and all in number two, it was, if you go back and look at it, it's got trains all over it, foreshadowing the trains at number three. So, yeah.
Hey, Strickland, eat lead. Um, I really liked. Was there so all three of these movies? I think of one, two, and three. I think number one and number three are they kind of wrap it, of course. But is there anything in these movies that you feel was unnecessary?
Unnecessary? I don't know. I don't know about unnecessary. I mean, really, you didn't need I mean, it's a great scene, but you didn't need the rock and roll scene where he's rocking out when he introduces rock and roll to the 1950s crowd and he sings Johnny B. Good. You didn't need that. That didn't lend anything to the story. It didn't. It was a cool scene, and it was cool to see him finally get to play in front of a crowd. That was like his dream, but it didn't do anything. Like they didn't like, oh hey, Marty McFly or Calvin Klein invented rock and roll. I mean, I guess you kind of saw, the dude pick up and call Chuck Berry, and that kind of invented rock and roll. I guess kind of like that, but like that scene was unnecessary. There's probably some stuff in number two that was unnecessary, which I think number two is probably the weakest of the three films in my personal opinion. There's a lot that like you could nitpick, I think, about that movie. I mean, we can talk. I'm sure we can talk days about like what time travel and like where, like I think what do you call it? Endgame explained it best, and this Back
Yes,
to the
thank
Future is
you,
one of the
thank you.
worst. What I mean, in terms of like what would really happen with time travel, Back to the Future is probably one of the worst offenders of like what actually wouldn't happen. But it's they were in the early stages of it, and I don't think they really were too cautious about holding on to these different timelines as like the Marvel thing. It's a big deal. It was like, hey, let's have more fun with it. You know what I mean?
What do
So
you mean? I can't mess with the space time continuum. It's like an episode of The Simpsons. I think it was a Treehouse of Horror episode where Homer goes back in time and he sneezes, and he comes
oh
back, and Ned Flanders is God.
yes, I've seen that one. They keep going back. He smashes a
Yeah,
butterfly or something. Yeah, I know what you're talking
and
about.
then there was a movie with Rachel McAdams, and I don't think it was. I don't want to say it was a time traveler's wife, but it was an English gentleman, and he would blink. He would go into another room, he would blink, and then things would change.
I don't know
Yeah,
about that one.
yeah, it was a really good. It was really good. I think I just searched for Rachel McAdams on Netflix.
The one, the
Oh, it was the time travelers. Oh, About Time. That's
About
what it
Time.
was. About Time. Yeah,
Never seen it. The
recommended.
Okay. Here's my biggest grief though, especially with number 2, I guess. The biggest thing, the problem I have in all of these movies is that damn almanac.
That damn thing, Gray's Sports Almanac.
Not only did that cause a bunch of trouble, but dude, it's this size. So you're telling me from 1950 to 2000, you're putting every single sporting event in here,
including horse
races. So dude, you know how many horse races there are? Like, there's horse races. That book should be like the freaking, like, I don't even know, War and Peace style. Like, for them to travel around, that bothered me even as a kid, as a 10-year-old kid. Like, I think that should be bigger because, I mean, how are you going to have 50 years worth of it's not just like, 50 years of the Super Bowl and the World Series. It's every game by every team for at least the 4 sports. And I think he said, and obviously it's horse racing because that's where Biff made his money. I've always had a problem with that. We should have been a bigger book. I understand that it's not that hard to, you got to fit it in with the story, and it's got to be small so they can carry it around and it can pass hands. If he's lugging around this big, huge book, you can't do as much with it. I get that, but come on. Let's be a little more real. Make it a little bigger, for God's sakes.
I've got my books right here, and I'm looking through my books to see if I have an almanac because I want to. Because I legitimately, I was that kid who was so interested in what happened in the past that I always had one. It was like my encyclopedia, and so for me, that I totally understand that. If there was one thing that didn't need to happen, no. But then, again, click the links about learning about the Greys and why the Greys are so intertwined in this. But like I said, I talked to my brother about it, and I was like, hey, we're going to do this Back to the Future show. And then I thought of it today. I said, hey, I remember you telling me about weird things happening with Back to the Future. So he sent me the link that I sent you. And all the stuff that I read about, I was trying to find a hidden meaning. I was trying to find it. There's another video how it references the Greek gods, Cosmos and Zeus and Hades and Poseidon and all of the stuff.
That's crazy.
It's just, so mind-blowing. It's just so mind-blowing how intertwined all of this stuff is. But I really like when Marty first meets Doc in 1955. He's like, "You Ronald Reagan, the actor?
The actor?
Yeah.
I thought Jane Wyman is the first lady."
Yeah,
it's great. It's very funny the going back in time and just the differences. Daddy-O. We call him Daddy-O, and they're so good. Which one's your favorite? If you had to pick one, which is your favorite of the 3?
The original.
Yeah.
The original, the first one, because it's just so good. It's just so good.
Really
good. The cinematography, the wardrobe, the setting. I'm looking at it right now, and it's the episode where it's the part where Doc's thinking that he's got a mind reader. He's like, you know what this means? This damn thing doesn't work.
It won't at all.
Yeah.
So great. You're right. I think number 1 definitely has like the best lines. That's for sure.
I got one for you.
Damn, where is this kid? Damn. Like, that was the funniest thing. Whoever wrote damn, credit to you, man, because that's a hilarious line. Damn.
All right, so it's a little bit more. I don't know where I got it from, but this is called the Baseball Anthology.
Okay. Look how thick that is. So that's like every game? Is that like
125 years. Stories, poems, articles, photographs, drawings, interviews, cartoons, and other memorabilia. It would have been nice if... Oh, wow, and the first one that I'm looking at is Rogers Hornsby.
That's cool.
Steve Garvey in a Padres uniform. Who's that? That's guy Sparky Anderson.
I like how the third one kind of mimics it mirrors the first one, kind of swapping the places of Doc and Marty. Like if you look at the scene in the first one where they go over like the plan, he has the model and it's the scale model. They have that exact same scene in the third one, but then it's flipped. In the first one, Lorraine comes to see Marty. In the third one, what's her name, Clara, comes to see Doc, and it kind of the same scene unfolds. I really like how they played back to the first one in the third one, especially. Mimic some scenes, mirrored some scenes. I mean, and really, really played back to that, and I really honored the first one. That was really cool, really well done.
I really like the third. The third one's really good as well. A couple of things, when he's got the frisbee, he's like, "Oh look, frisbee, far out."
Frisbee. It
How
was
was
like,
it far out? It was right in front of him.
yeah, and then he says, "Excuse me," and he's like, "What did he say?" He said, "Excuse me," and he's like, "For what?" Like not like it's not really an expression to be like, "Oh yeah, hey, what do you need?" It's like, "Excuse me, for what?" like asking that, like little things like that. I thought in the third one were really cool.
I
You guys don't
do.
know who that is.
I do like
And
how Manure was a very big part of
Manure.
how they pooped on Biff
It
in
was great.
two of the
And then
three
he
movies.
becomes an auto detailer because of
Yeah.
that, because it's got all messed up, and he becomes an auto detail guy.
Hey Gramps, make sure it's two coats this time, not just one. Was there anything else about these movies that you wanted to discuss before we wrap it up?
um, I just no, I think that's about it. You notice the Huey Lewis, obviously in the first one, you caught him,
Yeah, is
which
he
is
top
funny.
in the
He's like,
third one?
yeah, you're just too darn loud. Which is funny because he's playing a Huey Lewis song, which they're not. I don't think anybody would construe them, mistake them for a loud band. It's not like
No.
they're playing Metallica songs or anything like that.
Or
But that
Van
was kind of
Halen.
funny. Yeah, or anybody really. I love. Don't get me wrong, Huey Lewis is great, but they're not really like a heavy band. I thought that was kind of funny. Um,
Oh, one thing. Did you notice that the mixtape that Marty had when he's back in 1955 playing Van Halen on the cassette player? Did you see what
oh,
that said?
I didn't notice. No.
It just says Eddie Van Halen. It doesn't say Van Halen because the
Oh.
band wouldn't allow it to be played, but Eddie would.
Oh, interesting.
Rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, greatest guitar of all time, in my opinion. Um, yeah, I think it's just funny. There was just some good scenes. The the black dude. I mean, I guess maybe that was a little bit racist there. What he called him? What did he call him? At the end when Marty gets pushed in the trunk, and then they get or right before that or something. They push him in the trunk, and then they get out of. He's like, "Get out of here!" I call him like
Peckerwood.
no, they called the white dudes that, but like they call the black dude like Shadow or like Night. Yeah, that was super racist. They called him something
And
like that, or
yeah,
like I
Reefer
forgot what it
Addicts.
was, like smoke. But then they're all smoking weed
Yeah,
out of the car. So.
Spook. They call him a spook.
Spook, is that what it was? Okay,
Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah, but I mean that was obviously a little racist there, but it probably was at that time, and that's probably what they would, 1955, dudes were racist back then, like super racist. So
yep. We've
I
gone
could
through a lot of that
I could totally
already.
seeing that happen. So yeah, good point. Um, yeah, I mean everything's just great. There's these movies are great. They're classics. My kids love them. They're just can do no wrong in my opinion. I mean, obviously there's a few flaws in there, like we mentioned, but they're so good. I love it. Anytime they're on, it's an easy watch. I feel like number three's on all the time. I feel like I've seen probably that one the most, honestly.
If there's
Yeah.
there's a couple other trilogies that I would say would rival this one. And to me, I can only think of two of them because the other movies have gone off and Pirates of the Caribbean isn't a trilogy anymore. It's just a series.
Yeah.
If you had stuck with three movies, those three movies were great.
Yeah.
But then you add a fourth and a fifth. The Lord of the Rings trilogies, because you're talking about the Lord of the Rings, to me, those three movies are great.
Those are amazing movies.
The original Star Wars, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Those three movies are great. Those three movies I could watch. It's just like this. I could watch them in the background and know what's going on.
Would and
Um,
have, yeah, so good.
yeah, would and have. What about you, Jeff? What as far as this trilogy, do you have any others that you're a fan of?
Yeah, you missed a big one, man. Godfather.
The
Say what you
third,
want about
so the third
number
one,
three. Say what you want about number three, but go watch it again. Yeah, if get past the bad acting, get past what's her name, Sophia Coppola's horrible acting, and pay
and her
attention to the
incest with her
story.
cousin.
They do, yeah, right, yeah. But like the story in that, it's really good. Like him, trying to go legit and getting in with the Vatican and the banks. Like it's a really good movie. It's a really good story. It's really bad acted in some of it, but it gets a bad. I think number three gets a very bad rap. But Godfather is, I mean, I love those movies. Those are some of my all-time favorite movies. I studied those many times, in film school. Know all about those. I think that's one of the better ones out there for sure. Indiana Jones? Oh no, there's like five of them now. Never mind.
There's too many of them.
There's too many of those.
Once Shia LaBeouf came in,
Yeah, into the picture, started
yep.
swinging like a monkey through the freaking vines. Like, come on.
No.
What are we doing here? What are we doing here?
All right, I'll give you Godfather. I'll give you that because the first two are just so great. All right, and that is a wrap. Jeff, I will see you in the past.
I'll see you in the future.